When you think about the best immersive video games, what do you normally think of? There are some obvious ones, Grand Theft Auto, Baldur's Gate, Rust, or any type of survival game for that matter. But one series that I almost never hear mentioned amongst the greats is a visual novel released in 2001 for the Game Boy Advance, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, which will go on to spawn numerous sequels, spin-offs, and remasters that keep the series feeling fresh even to this day. So the question remains, how was a game that originally took place on a small handheld device able to capture the same magic as the fine-tuned, high-definition, mass-developed story-based games of today? Incoming spoilers for the first Ace Attorney game only, and we'll only be talking about the first 4 cases in the original release, not the final bonus chapter that was released with the game's port to the 3DS. I ask that you keep anything not relating to the first game out of the comments so as to avoid spoilers for myself and for any others who are playing through the game either with me on stream or on their own. So without further ado, let's talk about the first thing that makes Ace Attorney so good, the characters. There are no shortage of memorable characters in this game. Phoenix Wright with his quick-witted comebacks and bizarre antics like calling a parrot to the stand. The judge who seemingly goes out of his way to make things as hard for the defense attorneys as humanly possible. But there's one character in particular I want to talk about from the first game, and that is our rival, Miles Edgeworth. Edgeworth is a character that rarely falters, the personification of the perfect attorney. The first time we see him is in the second trial of the game, Turnabout Sisters, as we try and defend Maya Fey, the sister of our deceased mentor accused of taking her life. Miles is flawless in both his investigations and his prosecutions. He has a perfect court record upon his introduction, never having lost a case. He has newly researched evidence he holds onto for the last minute to catch his opponents off guard in critical moments, and more than anything, he's known to do whatever it takes to win the verdict in his favor. Throughout the first trial, we see how ruthless Edgeworth is in his prosecution. Even in the face of contradictory evidence, his idea of a successful trial is simple. It is his job to prove the defendant guilty with the evidence provided. If he can do that, then in his eyes, the justice system is working properly, as a defendant should be able to prove their innocence if it really lies in the truth. And so on he goes, through the first witness, April May, who, through our cross-examination, fesses to wiretapping the victim's phone, hinting that something else is going on, to the bellboy, who is bringing April her coffee on the day of the crime. And his preparedness doesn't relent, doesn't falter, until the third day of the trial, when the real killer, Red White, accuses Phoenix of the murder in an attempt to silence us. A lack of evidence, sure, but an accusation that Miles must follow through on nonetheless. He knows we didn't do it. The court knows we didn't do it. Even the judge knows that we didn't do it. But the power that Red White holds and the blackmail he has on others makes this an uphill battle, and despite knowing we're innocent, Miles continues to pursue a guilty verdict against us despite knowing each other in the past. You could argue that Edgeworth's ideals didn't change until after the result of this trial and about halfway through the next, and I'd agree with you. But it's during the game's third trial, Turnabout Samurai, where we start to see the cracks in his ideology and beliefs. For the second time in a row, it's Phoenix Wright versus Miles Edgeworth, except this time the case is less personal. In the first trial, we defended our friend. In the second, we defended the sister of our mentor. Now we're a full-fledged attorney, defending someone who we aren't really sure if they did it or not. And so for the first time, this case is strictly business. To be honest, this is the case where I really started to fall in love with the game. The first 2 trials were fun, and they did a great job at setting the tone for the rest of the story, but this trial really racks your brain and puts you in some pretty intense situations, including cornering the true culprit, only to be saved by Detective Gumshoe, bless my goat. And it's only after we call the true murderer to the stand and it becomes clear to everyone that our client is innocent that Miles starts to show his character growth. Because as the evidence piles up against Steve Vasquez, Edgeworth then joins us in questioning her until she confesses to the crime, throwing away his creed of getting a guilty verdict no matter the circumstances. But what caused the sudden change? It was likely a couple of different circumstances. The first and most obvious one being that his goal of a guilty verdict every time almost got his childhood friend falsely put behind bars. We don't know it at this point yet in the game, but Edgeworth's father was actually a defense attorney, so deep down he likely shares a similar innocent until proven guilty mindset that Phoenix does. And although he continues his path as a prosecutor, the way he carries himself between that second trial with Maya and this third trial, and later the bonus chapter with Lana Skye, are night and day, as he now seems interested in getting the defendant found guilty, but is less concerned with the overall outcome if the defense can come up with the acceptable evidence that points to another culprit. Yes, he still works against you, but he's also willing to work with you if the circumstance calls for it. But it's not until the final trial of the main game that we get to see Edgeworth's character fully come to life, as now it's him in the hot seat. It's him being tried for a crime he didn't commit. And it's our job to prove him innocent, while of course the prosecution will be doing everything in their power to get him found guilty, just like how he used to be. The final trial of the game is Turnabout Goodbyes. We'll talk more about the plot of this case in a bit, but I want to focus solely on Edgeworth for the time being. The trial centers around Miles being accused of murdering Robert Hammond, the defense attorney who got his father's then-alleged killer Yanni Yogi off the hook. To me, this is when Edgeworth started to stray from the path of a defense attorney over to one of prosecution. Hammond's idea for Yogi to lie about having brain damage despite being innocent in order to guarantee his acquittal won Yanni his freedom, yes, but also ruined his life. It also left Edgeworth with no closure on his father's death, even leading him to wonder if he himself committed the crime as a child, trying to find any explanation why there wasn't someone put behind bars for taking his father's life. This case ends up being two trials in one, with us first trying to find the real killer of Robert Hammond, and then delving into finding the real killer of Gregory Edgeworth. And in both cases, we end up defending Miles, even when he's trying to admit to a crime he only thinks he committed. And this is where Edgeworth's first main story arc comes to a close. Because Phoenix has now defended him in the killing of Robert Hammond, and also found the real culprit to his father's murder in Manfred von Karma, finally putting someone behind bars and taking accountability. And while it's too far in his journey for Edgeworth to change attorney paths now from prosecution to defense, seeing how the justice system can work in the hands of a great defense attorney seems to make him less focused on getting anyone charged and more focused on getting the right person. And Edgeworth is just one of the many well-written characters in the series. I could go on for a while about him some more, or Maya, or Phoenix, but those are topics for another day. Because we still need to talk about the best part of Ace Attorney, in my opinion, which is the way it structures its story. Even with the general cases in Ace Attorney all centering around different murders, the way the game relays information to you keeps everything feeling fresh and new. And the game does a great job at subverting viewer expectations. For example, in the very first case in the game, where we're defending our friend Larry Butts, we see the face of the actual murderer. We know Larry is innocent because we fully see what's happened. The same can be said for the second case in the game. We're defending Maya Fey against the charges that she killed her sister, but we already know exactly who did it. When we meet him for the first time in the story, we know he's our guy. And at that point, I was admittedly a little perplexed. Why was a game that focuses on murders and mysteries outright telling us who the killer was rather than having us figure it out ourselves? But then the third case came, and now to my surprise, they don't show us who the murderer is. And for the first time, it's up to us to figure it out on our own. I mentioned it previously, but for me, this is where the game really picks up and becomes great. Sorting through evidence, interviewing different people, really picking apart testimonies, and even more than all that, theorizing who the killer is. Is it the old security guard, the suspicious director? And when the case is all said and done, and we pin down the real culprit, the opening scene for the next case rolls. But this time, much like the first two cases, it appears they're going to show us who the killer is right off the bat again. Watching through the scene, I was confused by this, having thought we left that part of the early game behind, and as the scene was playing out, I couldn't help but feel this was an odd choice of direction. Until the camera pans up at the alleged killer, and it's none other than our rival, Miles Edgeworth. They weren't showing us the killer at all. Or were they? Both times in the past, when they showed us the culprit, that's who ended up being guilty. And the one time they wanted us to figure it out for ourselves, they didn't show us. And this leaves the player in a state of shock, unsure of what to believe. Do they believe the early parts of the story, where the killer is shown off the bat? Do they trust in their instincts and know that something feels off? And this, to me, is the highlight of the first game. This particular scene is the one I remember most vividly from the entire story. And I could sit here and delve into each individual case one by one, and maybe at some point that's something I'll do. But for now, I want to leave you with this. New games are constantly coming out, and some of them are amongst the best we've ever seen. But I think it's also safe to say that gaming has gotten expensive. The constant rising of prices, sometimes up to $100 for a new release of Madden or Call of Duty, I think has turned a lot of people away from the hobby thinking that they can't afford it anymore. And to those people I say, just because a game doesn't have incredible animation, or emotional voice acting, or looks like a movie you play through on your own, doesn't mean it's not worth your time. And there are a lot of games that are either available still on older systems you might own, or in Ace Attorney's case, have re-released updated experiences at a low cost. And if I was only looking toward the future of gaming and not taking the time to look back at it, I would never have discovered an immersive visual novel released way back in 2001 for the Game Boy Advance. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you're new, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you.